Week going well so far for everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah, going grand?
Yeah.
That's what I like to hear. So we're going to shift topics a bit and talk about some domestic policy, or some domestic affairs and how foreign policy might affect this in some way. Most importantly, race relations and how they are affected by foreign policy. So let's start off by asking this. How would domestic race relations be affected by American foreign policy abroad? Huh?
The outlook on America.
Outlook on America, how so?
Like people, they claim to be a free country, and communists might say abroad.
Okay, so we claim to be a free country, correct? We're democratic, we have open elections, we claim we have the best system in the world. Can you see over there? Okay, you want to move? Okay. So we claim we have the best system in the world, right? But at the same time, we know that not everybody is equal under the law at this point. So what kind of race relations are going on in the United States and say, up until around the 60s? Where do you think these race relations kind of started with the United States?
So,
In the South, but what in particular? What happened for a couple hundred years?
slavery.
Slavery. Alright, so around the 1600s, the first slaves were brought over from West Africa to work in the fields, to work in cotton fields, tobacco fields. Alright, it was obviously extremely cheap labor because you have to pay them anything except for the little quarters you built for them. So this racism is dated all the way back to slavery, especially in the Deep South. So again, that affects the relations because not everybody's equal by the time. Who knows when slavery was ended? About what time?
Civil War.
Civil War time, okay? The Civil War took place around the 1860s. It was officially abolished in 1865 when the war had ended. So this is roughly 100 years later. Although slavery is not over, racism is still running rampant, and African Americans are still not as equal as white Americans. So very good thinking about that there. So here are some effects the negative image abroad had on the United States. After World War II, President Truman, he desegregated the armed forces. African Americans had fought in pretty much every single major American conflict to date, including the American Revolution, including the American Civil War, including World War I, World War II. So they were always welcome to fight with us, but they weren't always allowed to be equal with us, if you will. So we finally desegregated the armed forces. But a lot of times, when they would fight on it for us in the American Revolution, in the Civil War, it was fought under the pretense that they would be free after. Eventually they would be free after the Civil War. However, the American Revolutionary War, they're kind of like, nah, not really, sorry. So it was kind of a way to bluff them a little bit to fight on our sides. Eventually the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964 for a couple of reasons we'll get to later. But then affirmative action took place in the 50s. Affirmative action kind of went along with the desegregation of the armed forces. It allowed African Americans and other minorities to have an equal opportunity to work in the civil service, which is the government as we know, as a white person would. And eventually, schools, universities, other places became desegregated. Now, who knows what the word segregating means in the first place? Split apart, to be separated. So, Governor George Wallace of Alabama, he had this rousing inauguration speech where he uses a lot of great rhetoric. Who wants to read the first sentence all the way up to my people here? Bill, give it a shot.
I stood where once Jefferson Davis stood, and took an oath to my people.
So Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederate States of America, who were the people that split away from the North during the Civil War. So President Davis of the Confederate States, he is already comparing himself to. I want to read this next sentence up to here. Kevin, go for it, please.
It is very appropriate then that from this cradle of the Confederacy, this very heart of the Anglo-Saxon Southland, that today we sound the drum of freedom.
So he's talking about the heart of the Anglo-Saxon Southland. Something you guys are probably kind of familiar with. Anglo-Saxon meaning white Christians from abroad, here in the heart of the Southland. That today we sound the drum of freedom. Okay, this all sounds okay right now, but let's see what else he goes on to say. Billy Keller, you want to start here, please?
I now try to call the freedom-loving blood and hymn in the name of the great people that I ever tried to church. I draw the line to love and pass the conflict before the peace of turning. And I say segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever.
Alright, so here's where it kind of gets a little bit different. He's talking, it's not really explicit in what he's saying at first. He's using a lot of different words here, but talking about sounding the drum of freedom. In the name of the greatest people that have ever trod this earth. It is, as we know, it is ignorant to say one type of people are better than another type. We are all people, we are all the same. That have ever trod this earth. I draw the line in the dust and toss the gauntlet before the feet of tyranny. And I say segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. Now, what's a bit hypocritical by talking about segregation and the drum of freedom?
Segregation is splitting people apart, it's making people not equal, but the drum of freedom is showing that they are equal.
Okay, so the drum of freedom is talking about how if everybody's free, everyone's equal. But how can that be so if he is praising segregation? But keep in mind, this is his inauguration speech. This is when he's becoming elected governor of Alabama, which means he pretty much runs the state. This is what he's saying in his opening inauguration speech. So we can see kind of where he stands on these issues now. So here's what's going on. Here is some segregation here. We can see these water fountains. There's the white water fountain. Nice big thing, probably good clean water coming out there. And then here is the black water fountain. Can you even really see it on that picture? It's kind of tough to tell, right? Even here, restrooms. Couldn't go to the bathroom in the same place if you were white or black. What do we notice about these men here? These boys, we'll say here. What do you notice?
They're showing signs that they don't want black people in their schools.
Yeah, they don't want black people in their schools. And what else do you notice about them physically? They're young. I'd say these kids are probably your age. Now, a lot of the times, the young people were a product of their environment, so they kind of listen to what their parents say. You know, we always think our parents are right. We're never going to really say that they're wrong or go against what they believe. So this is what they've been ingrained to believe their whole life. It's unfortunate, but this is the kind of thing that still went on here. Anything else about these pictures you guys notice, or strikes you as odd, or stands out to you at all?
Black people at the end of the bus.
Black people at the back of the bus, white people at the front of the bus. Why couldn't they just say black people on the left side, white people on the right side? I mean, I don't know, I didn't make the rules. What about this? Colored entrance only. They couldn't even walk through the same door as a white person. This is how regimented this segregation was in this time. Now, there was an act by some young African-American men and women, now I mean young, they were school-age children, where they attempted to desegregate a prominent business district in Alabama, which was known to be segregated. So this happened in May of 1963 in Alabama. And they wanted to peacefully integrate the white business district. It was a Friday, I believe. They'd skipped school, so this was against their parents' wishes. And then all they were going to do was simply march down there have a seat in a diner, go see a movie, go do a shop, do a little bit of shopping, peacefully, just say, we're no different than you, we're no worse than you. However, as this picture dictates here, it didn't go as smoothly as they had planned. The sheriff was a man by the name of Bull Connor. Bull was his nickname. He's a former KKK member. Are you guys familiar with what the KKK is? Okay, so it was a white supremacist group that was started up during and after the Civil War. So what he does is he orders the crowd to be broken up by fire hoses. Have you guys ever been hit by a fire hose before? Or anything like that? I have not either, but it has the capacity to push a person down the street. It can strip bark off a tree. So it's very powerful. It's not just like, oh, there's water, I'm going to, walk away now. No, this was being forcefully pushed out of here. However, the protesters knew they had to remain peaceful or all of their actions would be nullified because the media would just say, look at what these violent African Americans are doing to try and force themselves into the way of our culture. So they had to remain peaceful no matter what was thrown at them. Well, eventually, the sheriff lets out the German shepherds here. Well, what does this picture tell us? Attacking a black man. What about the background here? Black people, oh, they're just looking. Is anybody really helping them? Why? They're terrified. I'd be terrified too. It's a tough thing to go stand up. You've got another one sitting right there waiting. I don't know if you can see that dog right there. There's another one waiting. So the German shepherds are released. The famous photographer was around here at the time taking pictures. His name was Bill Hudson. The next day, are you related to you?
Maybe.
Probably not. So, the next day, this picture appears on the cover of the New York Times. Now, have you guys heard the phrase, a picture says 1,000 words? So you can just see this, and we don't know the context of it. This photograph could have been taken anywhere, at any time. This man could have been doing something illegal. We don't know the background of this picture entirely. But all we can do is say, there were some protesters the other day, and this is all we see. President Kennedy was notorious for reading all the major newspapers in the morning across America. He was something known as a speed reader. You guys ever heard of a speed reader is? He could read, it would take him a couple minutes to read an entire newspaper. So he would just go and read all of them. All right, very, very bright man. So he sees this picture, and this is when he starts to know this is the final straw where we need to start protecting our image overseas. Because if the Soviets see this stuff, this is just propaganda for them. How can this be the free world? How can this be the right way to democracy and equality if African Americans and white people can't even have lunch in the same place? And this is the type of thing that are being done to hold them down and oppress them even further.